Therunningman is the latest Stephen King adaptation and is directed by Edgar Wright. It stars Glen Powell, who plays Ben Richards, a man who's just trying to save his family in this dystopian future, and specifically his daughter, who is sick and needs medical help. In order to get the money to provide for his family, he enters this game show competition, competition really, where he's hunted by a whole bunch of people, basically everyone, and must survive 30 days while being hunted. And if he survives the 30 days, he gets a $1 billion prize. This is definitely both the most and least interesting Edgar Wright film, as it feels the most not like him. It's very generic in terms of its direction, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just, you don't look at this film like all of his other films and go, oh, that's an Edgar Wright film. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, and I see why this is hitting with audiences. Glen Powell is such a good lead as the main character in this film. When I first heard that he was the main star, I was a little confused because obviously him and Arnold Schwarzenegger are very different actors, but once I learned that this is a much more faithful adaptation to the book, all that sort of puzzled confusion that I had went away. His love for his family and his charm really make him a compelling lead and a character you root for. And he's also a little bit crazy, so he's really interesting too. The action is such a blast from start to finish and has so much energy and excitement to it. It adds a lot of humor, which adds to that excitement. And the new set pieces and stunts and all that appeared to be mostly practical, except for obviously the big dystopian stuff, were really interesting and added to the action and made just for a more visually pleasing movie. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit more intense, but it is definitely strictly more entertaining than intense, which is okay because at the end of the day, you go to movies to be entertained, or movies at least like this. Therunningman also balances its action with its pacing really well. There's a ton of action, yes, but never too much, and it offers plenty of slow build-up moments to hone in on the story and get you to, care about what's going on and focus more on what's happening. And for being 2 hours and 13 minutes, the movie never feels too long, and I wouldn't say that I was ever really bored with it, with an exception, which I'll get to later. I absolutely dug the visuals as well. I'm a huge fan of dystopian, futuristic looking movies like Blade Runner and The Terminator. This looks very different from those movies, but the set pieces in here were just brilliant, as I already kind of mentioned, but it really is a very good looking movie and a very convincing looking movie, whether the set pieces are CGI or practical or not. The city design and landscapes are just really, really cool to look at. I mean, even the cars were cool to look at. And all of this stuff I didn't really get from the trailer, so it was definitely kind of a pleasant surprise. However, this version of Therunningman definitely did let me down quite a bit. I was really excited about it. It was one of my most anticipated movies of the last quarter of the year. Not because of it just being a Stephen King adaptation and being directed by Edgar Wright, but the trailers really made this look super exciting. And it was super exciting, but at the end of the day, the story was very shallow, and I didn't get much from it. The directing, like I said, also felt very generic and like it was appealing to mainstream audiences, unlike Edgar Wright's other films, while at the same time being rated R, which is kind of weird because this movie definitely could have been PG-13 if it wanted to. So, the fact that it was rated R was just kind of weird because it didn't really fully go for it. Adding on to that, a downright negative I have is that there isn't much to take away from the story of this film. It barely explores its themes of corruption, greed, and media, and whenever it does, it kind of feels like it's just forced in and not really a natural part of the story. This film works best when it's just a simple action movie. And another thing that really bothered me was it hooks you with this emotional hook that gets you to really care about him and his situation with his family and his daughter, but it kind of forgets it and loses track of it as the film goes along, and has to keep reminding you over and over again through visions and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't really get back to it until the third act. And I have to be honest, I would have given this a positive review if it weren't for the third act. The third act really drops the ball, and this is why I said that the pacing was really good for the most part, because the pacing just dives off a cliff in the third act. It just gets overly complicated with twists and turns and stuff that just kind of come out of nowhere, it seems. And it just gets to the point where it's just too much, and it's too long too. And it loses track of what made the movie so entertaining in the first place, with all of its action and stuff. With, again, going back to those themes, and it explores those themes, but in an overcomplicated fashion, to the point where it just, again, loses point of why this movie was entertaining in the first place. And as I already said, the themes just don't really work because they're not focused on enough beforehand. And the movie works just best as a simple action film with a simple yet really enticing premise. When it comes to the content, it definitely warrants its R rating, but it's not hard R in any way. I gave the intense stuff a 6 out of 10 just because I could find some people finding it intense, even though I didn't. The language is pretty strong. There are plenty of F-bombs, but it's not over the top, like it's not insane or anything. Sex and nudity, there's the scene where you see the main character's butt, but that's really it. And then there's like a scene where you see a little bit of a strip club, but overall with that sex and nudity, it's not horrible. There are a whole bunch of sexual jokes though. And then for violence and gore, it definitely gets pretty violent, but it's not super gory. So at the end of the day, Edgar Wright's Therunningman is definitely far from being a bad movie. In fact, I contemplated upping the rating just a little bit, but its shallow story and really disappointing third act made it kind of a disappointment for me. That's it for this one, guys. If you want to check out more of my videos, you can obviously find them on my YouTube channel. If you want to see more of my reviews, though, like outside of YouTube, I have my website, Christian Cinema Critic, which is also linked on my profile. And the next movie I'll probably be reviewing is Zootopia 2, so be on the lookout for that one. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.